Good morning, or good afternoon if you're on the East Coast, or the Pacific, I guess everywhere except where I am. So, this week's book was Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It, and it was so good. So, chime in and leave comments, and there's just so much good stuff. And what I love about this book is that I know a lot of it works because a lot of it worked for me. It's the same strategies and techniques I used. But I wish so bad I had read this book years ago, because it would have helped me so much faster. Because I had to figure all this stuff out on my own instead of taking his advice and learning from his lessons. So feel free to jump on, but I have a lot of notes that I'm just going to start going over because these strategies are amazing. So the author is Kamal Ravikant. I hope I said that right. Apologies if he finds out I didn't. And these are basically the 4 simple steps that he lays out into how he transformed his life with this idea of loving yourself. So why love? Why commit to doing these strategies? Why is any of this important? Well, you know those people who are just so in love that they just kind of glow. You see them and they're just glowing. We can have that from not only loving other people, but from loving ourselves. There's no rule that says you only get that glow if you're in love with someone else. You can glow just because you love yourself. And the thing about love is that as humans, we're drawn to it, right? So love attracts love. So if we are glowing because we love ourselves, others will be drawn to us to love us also. So as you learn to love, what you'll find out is life will love you back. Love itself, why love? Well, love is everything you need, really. Love is nurturing, accepting, gentle. Basically, love is healing. And what's great is that you don't have to do any of those things. You don't have to do the healing and the accepting and the nurturing. You just have to love, and then let love take care of all the rest of that. And Kamal argues in the book that you have to love yourself first. I agree with him. I didn't always agree with him, but it was really hard for me to learn that lesson, and I learned it on my own. But I was raised Christian, and so first you love God, second you love other people, and then third you love yourself. That's how I was raised. So to flip that mentality and love yourself before loving others was a really hard change for me, but it's so true. What happens is you unlock new doors of love. So even though I loved other people, once I committed to loving myself, it opened all new doors, and I've never even experienced love like this. It's crazy and it's great, and that's why I think he's right. You have to love yourself first. It's kind of like on the plane when they tell you to put your own mask on before helping the person next to you in an emergency. It's just like that. You really do have to take care of your own stuff before you have that freedom to help others. So a couple imagery things we need to hit before we get into his 4 steps that he actually talks about, because he goes back to this imagery a lot. So first piece of imagery we need to talk about is he equates love with light. So anytime he's talking about light, he's saying love. So he uses a lot of imagery where, and he even starts his book saying that darkness is the absence of light, which is true. Darkness itself is not a physical, tangible thing. Same with cold. Heat and light are waves and particles that move through the air and can be measured. Cold and darkness are both just the absence of those wavelengths. They're not physical properties in their own. They're just the absence of other things. So darkness is the absence of light. And I love how much he talks about darkness, because that is the one word I would use to describe my mental health struggle. I talk a lot about darkness because that's really what it felt like for me. It felt like I was living in the dark 24/7 and I couldn't get out of it. So his imagery he uses is, if you find yourself in darkness, grab a rag and start cleaning your window, and that lets the light in. So what he's saying is these practices that he lays out are the rag that when we're practicing them, we're cleaning our window so that we can let more light in. Another piece of imagery he uses, which I love, is he talks about hallucinated snakes. So if you didn't read the book, basically the story comes from a schizophrenic case where the man was seeing hallucinated snakes, and he would just scream all the time because he's deathly afraid of them. And the man snapped him back into reality by presenting him with real snakes. And the man was able to distinguish what was real snake and what was not. So why Kamal tells us this story is because he equates the snakes to fear, which is not useful, not helpful, usually irrational. And we can't fight fear directly by being more afraid. How we fight fear is we focus on reality. That's what he says. So when you are afraid of something, unless there's like a fire or something next to you, or you're on the edge of a cliff, fear a lot of the times is not helpful at all. It's useless. So recognize it in those moments as the hallucinated snake that it is. Okay? So when he talks in his book about hallucinated snakes, he's talking about fear that is useless and you need to step through it. Once you realize, because you fight fear with reality, once you can focus on reality, see, the man who was schizophrenic, he was so afraid that he lost touch with reality and thought all the snakes were real. And once he was snapped back into reality, realized he had the ability to tell that those snakes weren't real because they were see-through. He could see through them. And then he could walk through them and he could overcome that. So we have to focus back on our reality to get out of that fear mindset that controls us and overwhelms us, so that we can recognize hallucinated snakes as the useless things that they are and walk past them. And I think it's really helpful to be able to take non-tangible things like emotions, like fear, and be able to put them into some kind of physical form, like imagining them as a snake, or picking up a rock and saying, this rock is all of my frustration, and throwing it. Okay, taking something intangible and finding a symbolic way of making it tangible to release it and work through it can be really helpful sometimes. I hope you guys brought your coffee to book club. I hope if you're watching the review or anything, you also have coffee. I drink it at night, so I know it's like evening on the East Coast, but drink it anyways. Drink some decaf if you have to, or some hot chocolate. Mm. Yeah. One more thing about fear. I forgot I had this note. Was well, I'll just skip that note. It's not important. It was just a personal story about how I'm overcoming fear. Well, I'll tell you. Yeah, it's important. Alright. We're gonna kill a minute here. So for Kamal, he says that writing his book was a big thing for him. He was so afraid of the judgment and the backlash. But when he really asked him questions that we'll get to in a minute, as his fourth step he recommends, he realized that those fears were hallucinated snakes, and that by writing the book he could help people. And that's basically what I do. I have a lot of doubts hitting me from time to time about sharing my story of recovery from depression, and sometimes I get things thrown at me like they just try to invalidate that I even had a struggle, and it's usually the people that are closest to me, because they were so close to me that they couldn't see it. Biggest thing with this, most dangerous thing with depression, is that it's really a silent killer. You can be with somebody every day and not notice it, because people are so good at hiding it, especially when they don't want help, when they have ego problems and they're raised in backgrounds where it's not okay to get help and to not be okay, and to not, it's sometimes really a stigma we gotta overcome, because it is okay. We all can't handle it all the time. That's normal. What's not normal is pretending you can handle everything all the time all on your own. That's not normal. So I'm on this mission now to help people, but overcoming that fear and doubt and those invalidating comments are something I have to go through, but those are my hallucinated snakes. And I love this imagery because I have a very visual brain. But if you don't have a visual brain, if you're one of those abstract people who can't close their eyes and just imagine and picture things, when Kamal says to imagine the light, maybe you can actually go sit in some light. Maybe that would help you. Alright, let's dive into these 4 things he gives us, because they're good. First thing he does is a mental loop. What he means by this is he just constantly tells himself, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself. Why does this work? Well, he explains that most of the things in our heads are not new thoughts, but actually memories. And this was the first I had heard this, but you know what? I believe it. It makes perfect sense to me. And the more you think a thing, the stronger that memory is, right? The more we remember something, the stronger we remember it. But if you never think about it, maybe a couple years down the road, and you're like, oh, I really can't remember that. Gee, I wonder why. The more you think it, the more your brain will fire that stronger. So create good loops for your brain to replay instead of destructive ones. Now in my journey, I've done the same thing, but I've called it rumination instead of mental loop. But it's basically the same thing, and it can be very dangerous. You have to interrupt negative thoughts and replace them with positive ones. You've probably seen Mel Robbins' viral video lately, where she says the same thing in regards to anxiety, but really it works for anything. You have to stop that mental thought when you're in it, and that can be really hard because a lot of times we're doing it subconsciously, right? We're not paying attention to our thoughts 24/7, but they're still going. So interrupt it and put something else in. And what's great is that I usually do the mental loop because I have to stop negative thoughts. I'm always afraid of the danger of ruminating on them. And Kamal uses this same strategy, but flipped, for positive thoughts, where he wants to promote positive thoughts. So it's very good stuff, and it works. So his mental loop is, I love myself. That's what he forces to play over and over in his brain until his brain catches on, and that stuff naturally starts to flow instead of the old negative things he used to think. And this is a really important practice because so much of what our brains present to us through the day is subconscious, okay? So regardless of whether we're consciously thinking it or subconsciously thinking it, both of them are still affecting us. Even the subconscious thoughts that we're not paying attention to are still impacting what we're feeling and how we're reacting. So by doing the mental loop, we're helping to retrain what those subconscious thoughts are that are going to run. We're basically forming these deep memory grooves that we can now flow memory through those grooves instead of the other ones that were bad. And Kamal has this opinion that it works because we have primal instincts towards love. And all we have to do is practice it, and that love will naturally flow because it is natural for us as humans. And I think he's onto something. I don't think that's necessarily crazy. Because his mental loop of, I love myself, was very intentional. He had made a commitment that he was going to say that and commit to that and repeat it all the time. I never had that. In fact, I was 3 years into my recovery from depression before I made that, like, I gotta do this. I gotta learn to love myself. And not, I have to. Because I was still dealing with self-loathing at that point. What had happened was I had kind of relapsed a little bit, but when I came out of the relapse, I had committed to, I had to get over this. I had to learn to love myself. And the loop that played in my mind, which I did not consciously commit to saying, but it just happened. I just needed it so badly that my mind started to do it all on its own. And I would find myself repeating, I love you, Devin. I love you, Devin. I love you, Devin. And I would just repeat, I love you, I love you, I love you, but I'm talking to myself. You, but I'm talking to myself. I love you. And I just think it's so funny that he says that love is a natural process for our brains to do, because this is something that my brain did all on its own without me telling it or committing to. His mental loop strategy was something I picked up unintentionally, and my brain just started doing it because I just needed it that badly for survival. I was in such a bad place. And it works. I actually caught myself last night. I was just about to fall asleep, and I kind of like woke up for a second, and I caught myself. I had been saying it to myself as I was falling asleep, which is something Kamal says to do it till you fall asleep. Okay, where am I at in my notes? Sometimes I accidentally say it out loud. Like, I don't even realize I'm thinking it until I say it. It like slips out, and I'm like, oops, what did I just say? Nobody heard that, did they? Because it is subconscious, but it's still affecting us. So he recommends doing the mental loop at minimum twice a day. When you wake up, take a long, deep breath and say your mental loop. And then again at the end of the day, do it until you fall asleep. which is what I ended up doing last night, and I didn't even mean to. It was completely subconscious. I didn't intend to do it, and here I was doing it anyways. So these practices work. His second step that he recommends in his book is meditation. And he does 7 minutes a day. Why 7? Because the music he likes is 7 minutes, so he does 7 minutes. So the steps he lays out: put on your music, sit comfortably, close your eyes, imagine the light streaming in on you, streaming down from above. If you don't have a visionary brain and you can't imagine light, sit in the actual light maybe. Breathe in, I love myself. Breathe out, and let go of whatever comes out, whatever comes to you in that moment, just let it go. And then just repeat that. Breathe in, I love myself. Breathe out, whatever comes. And at the end, you smile, but not just on the outside. Smile inside out. Smile with your whole body. And then that's it. You're done. And it's only a couple minutes, if you only need it to be a couple minutes. A couple things he does recommend, though. Listen to something that makes you feel good, but only listen to it while you're meditating. Okay, let it be an anchor that pulls you into your meditative state. And it helps also if you do it at like the same time, maybe the same place. Have this routine built, and all these things, the consistency of them will help pull you into your meditative state. Sorry, hit my mic. Third practice that he wants people to do is the mirror. This is the one that people tend to be very resistant to doing. And it makes people uncomfortable when they don't love themselves. They can't just stare at themselves and say, I love you. But he does say, if you feel uncomfortable with this exercise, that's all the more reason why you should probably be doing it. So he does recommend doing the mirror practice back to back in the morning with the meditation. He says if you double them up, it's just very powerful. And really, you could probably do both within 10 minutes. So he sets an alarm on his phone for, I think he said 5 minutes. And he just stares at himself in the mirror. He sits very close so that he can only see, sometimes. He says a couple ways he's done it. Once he did it at the gym. But he recommends you can sit very close to the mirror so that it's only, you can't see your whole body. Don't focus on your body, focus on your eyes. And if you can't focus on one, just pick one and stare at just one. And the eyes culturally tend to be the windows to emotion. So when we're staring into our eyes, we're staring deeper into our emotions. That's like how we culturally have symbolized the eyes. And if you've ever looked somebody in the eyes and told them you love them, and I hope at some point in your life you've had that experience where you love somebody and you looked them in the eyes and you've told them that, what you're doing is you're giving yourself that same gift. That's what we see in the mirror exercise is what other people see when we do it to them. And that can be a very nice, heartfelt gift, and there's no reason we can't give that to ourselves. So while you're doing this mirror exercise and telling yourself and staring into your eyes and saying, I love you, it's very powerful if you actually say that out loud and not just in your head. Even if you have to just whisper it, I love myself. That adds an auditory component to it, and verbal affirmations, Kamal doesn't call them that, but that's what they are. They're verbal affirmations, and they're shown to work. Verbal affirmations work. So verbal affirmations is another thing that I utilized in my practice as well. There's a lot of power in adding an auditory component and hearing it said and getting it outside of your mind, because what it does is it takes a thought that's in your mind that's very intangible, and it creates a sound wave that hits our ears. Sound waves are physical properties, so we're taking something that we usually think of as intangible, like a thought, and we're creating it into something physical, a sound wave that we can hear with our ears, which makes it very powerful, because we're taking something intangible and making it tangible. So the fourth thing he recommends is ask yourself a question. This is his fourth practice to loving yourself. Ask yourself a question. Questions are very powerful because they force us to acknowledge, engage, and answer. It's natural to want to answer when you're asked a question. So ask yourself the right question, though, so that you get the right engagement, so that your answers are driven by love. And he gives 3 examples of questions you could ask. The first one is, if I love myself truly and deeply, would I let myself experience this? And this question's great for dealing with other people. The second question is a slight variation to that one. If I love myself truly and deeply, what would I do? This is great for making choices, life choices, overcoming fear, recognizing reality, taking action. Just a slight variation on the first question. The third question he says you can try out is, are you in light or dark? If it's light, great, let those thoughts go, roll with them. But if you're in dark, get out your rag and start cleaning your window. You can do something like a 10 breaths exercise. This is something else he talks about throughout the day. He practices his mental loop by adding 10 breaths. He'll stop, he'll look at the sky or something, and he'll just stop and he'll just take 10 breaths slow in and out, and he'll do his mental loop verbal affirmations. I love myself. I love myself. I love myself. He just does that throughout the day. That's how he gets his practice in. That's him getting out his rag and cleaning his window. So he recommends only starting with one question, though. That way it can be a foundation for you. And I had a question also that was my foundation for making choices, and it still is, and it has been for about 5 years now. So my question, when I started on my recovery, I did not love myself. Everything I did was self-destructive, very self-destructive, because the goal was to be self-destructive until it eventually killed me, because that's how depression was, and I didn't want to live, and it was too hard, and that was the whole idea. So it was really, really hard for me to know what good choices were. I was already committed to making bad ones. So when I first made my commitment to fight for my recovery, my mind was so warped and twisted, I didn't even know what good choices were. But I didn't know what love was, but I knew a whole lot about the darkness. And I had decided that the darkness was my enemy. So my question that I would ask myself, and that I still ask myself to this day, now I know what love is and I can make choices based on love. But sometimes I'm still just not sure. And I think, what does my enemy want me to do? And that alternative flip, I can't always tell what the good choice would be, but I can usually pick out the bad one. So I just ask myself, what does the enemy want me to do? And then I do the opposite. And that has worked really well for me. And it's been, like Kamal says, a foundation that I've used in this process. So questions work. Having a foundation question to make choices on, it works. You can try one of his 3. You can try mine if you want. So those are his 4 practices. And once you've gotten into the habit of doing them, and he does say you should do all 4. You shouldn't just pick one. You should commit to doing all 4 of them, because if you're committing to loving yourself, why wouldn't you? Why would you limit yourself to only one when all of them can help you? So once you've tried these 4 a couple times, and you kind of got the physical part down, add feeling and emotion into them. And something that can help invoke emotion is just slow down your breathing, really focus on it. Imagine the light coming in. It's okay if you don't feel anything at first. It's okay. I certainly didn't feel anything when I first started my journey. But I committed to going through the motions. And one day, they meant something. And that's exactly what Kamal says. Just go through the motions. Just keep saying, I love you, I love you. It's okay if you don't believe it. One day you will. One day you'll realize that it means something. It works. So I love that him and I actually both preach that. I'm a big believer of going through the motions until one day they work. And he preaches that a couple times in his book. Next thing you can do, after you've made some progress by doing these 4 practices, and you've really deepened that new grove of love and it's flowing, you can add another layer to it by saying thank you. So adding a little gratitude is something you can alternate with your I love you. If you're doing your mental loop or your meditations, you could do one breath, I love myself, and then the next breath, thank you. And it relates back to what I said in the beginning, where if you love yourself, life will love you back. And yeah, it really does. He calls it magic, and I don't disagree. That's kind of how it feels. It can't be rationalized because it's things science tries to say that, like, we're changing our mental attitude and that makes us do things that we wouldn't normally do, that makes our lives better. I disagree. I don't agree with that. I agree science is right, but I think there's a lot more that they just can't figure out. Because things way beyond the scope of our control, or anyone's control, will naturally fall into place for you. Kamal says it, he's lived it, I've lived it. I can't explain it, but you don't have to know how it works just to know it works. Isn't that great? You don't have to know how it works. You just have to know it works and you accept it. And he says gratitude should be a thing you add at the end. I actually started with gratitude because like I said, I wasn't capable of loving myself. I wish I had had this book back then. Maybe it would have helped me a lot, but I actually started with gratitude, so. And we're doing our gratitude challenge right now in August. I hope you're all doing well. Writing your daily things down, working on your letters, or paying it forward if you're doing steps 2 and 3. So these 4 practices that he gives us, we need to make them rituals. He goes on to say how important it is to put these things on autopilot, okay? You don't think about brushing your teeth, you just do it. So things start out as a chore, right? Little kids don't like to brush their teeth. You have to make them. It has to be a chore on their little checklist. But eventually it becomes a habit and we just do it. That's how we need these things to be. It might start as a chore, but you gotta make them habits because our habits run our lives. Whether you want them to or not, that's just the truth. Your habits will run your life. So make a vow to do these things. Kamal and I apparently both have a habit that when we get in moments of very strong emotion, we put pen to paper, and after the emotion has passed, we go back and we read what we wrote. And for him, he ended up writing his vow to love himself. So that was very powerful for him. And your vow that you make to love yourself should be powerful. It should invoke emotion. And if you're working on writing it and you want to edit it, go back, rewrite the entire thing. Feel the power of the whole thing together. And then put it somewhere where you'll see it. Maybe it's the cover on your phone. Every time you pick up your phone, you see it. I do that a lot, actually. And he says he puts his in the bathroom. But wherever you're going to put it, just put it somewhere you're going to see it. Don't write it and then close your notebook and put it on the shelf and forget it. So how do you make these things rituals? He says the exact same thing that I've been saying for months. Make a checklist. Get a calendar. Actually do like X's. Why does it work for children? Because it's very just simple. It gives you that simple hit of accomplishment. I think it's the serotonin. I get dopamine and serotonin mixed up, but one of them, we get a little hit of it when we get the accomplishment of X's on our to-do list. And the bottom line is, if you're looking back at your calendar and you're seeing that you have not a lot of X's, it doesn't matter what excuses you made for why you didn't do them that day. These practices do not take a lot of time. It can be 10 minutes a day. But 10 committed minutes. Don't multitask when you're doing them. Commit to them and just them. Don't brush your teeth while you're doing your mirror exercise, he says. So, if you're not seeing X's on your calendar, it doesn't matter what your excuses are. The bottom line is you're falling short on what you should be doing, on what you need to be doing to live your best life. And when times are good, we tend to get lazy and coast. And it's okay to slow down, but don't stop. If you don't keep doing maintenance on those new flows of love, what happens when you get a storm and the trees fall on them and now it's dammed up, and the old grooves of hate and doubt and fear, that dam that you had built up bursts and now it's flowing again. You have to keep doing some maintenance. So get out your rag and clean your windows, as he says. Because at some point, we're probably all going to fall off course. It just happens. We're humans. None of us are perfect. But the one good thing that he says about falling is that our egos fall faster than us. So have your line in the sand. Have your bare minimum. His bare minimum is his meditation. If he does nothing else for the day, he's going to do his meditation. My line in the sand is my gratitude practice, which I do with my prayers at night. It doesn't matter how the day went, I don't fall asleep until my knees hit the floor. So that is my bare minimum line in the sand foundation. So, to move on a little bit here, because there's a lot we've hit the 4 main points, but there's a lot more we can talk about yet. Because Kamal talks a lot about his childhood self. How do you love yourself in a moment when you're falling apart? Well, he pictures his childhood self, if he's falling apart because of childhood trauma. He pictures himself as that little boy, and he gives himself a hug. That's it. He just hugs and loves that little boy the way he needed it when he was that little boy. And it doesn't have to be limited to hugging your childhood self. He also pictures his future self, who's figured it all out and is wise and living life, and he'll come back in moments when he's right now struggling and needs a hug, or just needs some of that love, and his future self comes back and just hugs him in that moment that he needs it. So that's some imagery again. And if you don't have a visual mind to be able to picture these sorts of things, I have a very visual mind, so I'm not sure what strategies you could alternate these with. You'd have to do some research if you're curious. But let me know if you have an abstract mind and you need some alternatives. I'll look into things for you. And maybe you've seen this video, it went viral years ago, where this woman is told to go back to her younger version of herself, her little girl version, and tell that little girl that she's fat, that she's ugly, that she's stupid, and all these horrible things. And the woman refuses. She won't do it because that would be horrible. She's not going to hurt this little child because she doesn't believe any of those things. So instead, the woman tells this little girl version of herself how wonderful she is, all these wonderful things. And the moral of the video was, if you won't say it to your childhood self, don't say it to your adult self. Be nice to yourself. There's no reason to be mean. Okay, we all have our inner child still. And that inner child is still very fragile and needs love. Give it what it needs. Quit being mean to yourself, because you're still just hurting that little child version of yourself that's still there. And this mental image doesn't just work for yourself, but it works for other people too. When he's dealing with somebody that he's having some difficulties with, he imagines giving them a hug and kissing the top of their head, and that's it. He just imagines loving them for a moment. And honestly, minus the kissing people's heads, I do the same thing. what I do, like I said, him and I, we're like, we have the same mind. We come to these same conclusions. When I'm dealing with somebody that's being difficult to work with and I'm getting frustrated, I take a moment to breathe. I remember a specific moment when I was being difficult to work with and how badly in that moment I just needed a hug, or I just needed someone to say, hey, are you okay? Or, you got this. And after I picture that person and I say exactly that to them. Sometimes I give them a hug. Sometimes I just say, are you okay? And those little moments of showing somebody else some love, even though it's just an imagined thing, it really helps you to be more understanding, tolerant, patient with other people. So it's a practice that works not only internally with yourself, but it works externally with other people also. And you don't have to worry about running out of love. It's not like it's limited. You don't have to ration it because you only have so much. It multiplies. So love yourself, love others, and watch it just grow and become more of your reality. Now Kamal says, if you're caught up in suffering and you're having a really hard time loving yourself, you can say something like, life loves me. This is what he calls a parachute. And if you feel like you're falling, your parachute's gonna save you. Employ it. And it doesn't matter if you don't believe that life loves you. Just say it. Say it till it works. And I have a parachute also, but mine is just a little different. I'm a Christian, so my parachute is God loves me, but it works. It is absolutely my life-saving parachute when I feel like I'm falling and I just can't love myself right now. And there's 3 reasons he says that you should say it even if you don't believe it. Even if you don't believe it, say it. 1, because it distances you from the disempowering stories of the mind, aka the lies of the enemy. 2, it takes you outside of yourself to the remarkable gift of just being alive. And 3, it reminds you of your own worthiness to being loved. So Kamal says he believes in something bigger than himself, because he has seen in his life things way beyond his control that have shifted for him when he has made this commitment. And the same has happened for me. So, whatever higher power you believe in, I hope you recognize that they love you and they want you to be loved. And if you don't believe in a higher power that believes that, there are other higher powers. Maybe pick a different one. Oh, wow. I'm going on kind of long. Is that really the time? There's a lot to cover in this book. I'm so passionate about it because it's gonna open a whole new level of life for you. It really is. Let me see what I can skip here. I can probably skip all that. Yeah, alright, we'll skip down to the end so we don't run over an hour. So back on the point of magic, which is how Kamal describes it. accept the magic, okay? Don't call it a coincidence, because the more you see the magic and accept the magic, the more life will give you the magic. It's true. Even from my Christian standpoint of getting blessings, same thing applies. Receive blessings. Be willing to receive blessings, magic, whatever you're calling it. I'm telling you, it works. And be willing to receive. Be more than willing. Expect it. Expect it. I'm going to give you some words of wisdom that I got years ago from a 90-year-old woman. She told me, and this was right at the turning point when I was starting in my recovery process. She told me this. She said, expect bad things to happen and bad things will happen. But expect good things to happen and good things will happen. And I thought she was crazy, not gonna lie. I was not deep into this self-improvement and I thought she was full of it. But I had nothing to lose, so I tried it. And turns out she's not crazy. It works. Worked for me, worked for Kamal, worked for a friend Kamal talks about in his book. I mean, it works. Worked for this 90-year-old woman. Expect life to be good, expect magic, and it's exactly what you'll get. Even for things that are beyond your control. Alright, closing thoughts, because I don't want to go on forever here. Closing thoughts. Why should you make this commitment and do these practices? Well, because doing them, you have nothing to lose. It can't hurt you at all. But it has been transformational for so many people, and it can be for you too. So you have nothing to lose, but you might have everything to gain. So just think about that. And it's been a real pleasure to get to go through this book. I hope you take something great from it. I hope you make some vows and commit to these practices, because they're very simple. Simple is better. You don't need anything super complicated. You just keep it simple. Simple is always better. Kamal says it, I say it. We've both figured out a lot of these things because they work, okay? So, we'll meet back again in... it's actually 3 weeks. We'll meet September 7th for our next book club. We're going to do the first and the third Thursdays of the month, so... Next one is September 7th. It's in 3 weeks, so maybe I'll pick a little longer book. Does anybody have recommendations? I didn't have one prepped yet. I'll let you know this weekend. I guess I'll pick one by the weekend and let you know. So, it's been a real pleasure. Alright. Love you guys. Peace out.